Hello and welcome. Today I am here with Michelle MACE Curran. This is the Lounge. Now, the Lounge was previously called the Pivot Cast, where I would bring guests on for interviews. And the Lounge is a place where you can kick back, relax, and nourish the mind before jetting off to your next destination. While we all face turbulence in life, I truly believe that the pivot is your superpower. And I'm on a mission to inspire millions to chase after their dreams and fall in love with life again, just like Michelle helped me do at the end of January, but without the crash and burnout. So after all, it's life's just a game. And how do you want to play? Get your pre-flight briefing here to combine mindset and habits to design the ultimate trip, aka your life. So today I have the pleasure of bringing on a fellow female rock star in the aviation industry, Michelle Mace Curran. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Yeah, I'm excited for this, Sarah. I think it's going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those of you who don't yet know, Michelle used to be a fighter pilot in the US Air Force. And not only that, she was one of the only female Thunderbirds in the Air Force. And the Thunderbirds are the ones doing all the air shows and acrobatics. So, an extreme amount of precision and constantly flipping her perspective were just a part of daily life. Now, as we know, when we fly, we often face turbulence. So, today we're going to talk about how her experience as a fighter pilot helped her with a pivot into entrepreneurship, as well as how that new perspective helped her to gain the ability to face day to day challenges in life. So, Michelle, while we get started, I always like to ask everybody, what is your superpower? The pivot is your superpower. So, what is your superpower?
Yeah, the pivot is a great superpower, and I think we're going to dive into that a bunch more. I think my other superpower, I was asked that question for the first time a few months ago, and I actually was like, "What is it?" Um, and people are surprised by what the answer is coming from my background, but I think my superpower is actually empathy,
Mm.
which people are like, Air Force or military, and then they're like, fighter pilot. This does not compute.
Right.
Um, But I had some amazing bosses and amazing leaders that not were not only great pilots, but what really made them stand out was an overarching theme of empathy for the people that worked for them.
Yeah.
And I think I possess that as well. And you see today that a lot of people have a hard time putting themselves in others' shoes. Like,
Mm.
right, everyone's very divided, kind of stuck in their camps. It's very black and white. And I think that empathy and being able to have an open mind, and even if you don't agree with someone, being able to understand why they feel and think the things that they do is just it's just such a huge superpower in business, in your personal relationships. It can really change everything.
Absolutely. I love that because you're very correct. People in the Air Force, people in the military, or in aviation and aerospace in general, we tend to have a lot of high performers, type A, really driving energy and we're going down checklists, right?
Task
There's no
oriented.
box for how you feel today on that checklist.
Totally.
But understanding that, as you said, not only do you connect better with your peers, but you can also lead and inspire and motivate people with that superpower. So I love that answer. Thank you. Michelle, from your experience being a fighter pilot, what was the impetus for you to pivot into entrepreneurship?
Several things. It wasn't just one thing, but I think the biggest drive to pivot wasn't me being pushed away from the Air Force. My contract was up with the Air Force, but I was at 13 years. Obviously, 20 is the goal for many people because that's when you get a retirement.
Right.
So I've gotten a lot of questions about why would you walk away from a retirement 7 years short, or why would you give up a dream job, because people put being a fighter pilot on a little bit of a pedestal. And for me, I had done it for a long time, obviously at a high performance, high pressure level. And so there was some of the burnout that you mentioned there for sure, especially the Thunderbird schedule is very demanding. But the biggest thing for me is that being a Thunderbird, I discovered this new passion for inspiring people that it was just so rewarding. And over time it became more rewarding to me than the flying did.
Mm,
And I couldn't really imagine just leaving that behind after doing it for so many years and seeing all of these people go on to do really cool things after I got to have just short conversations with them.
yeah.
And I refer to it now as I got to be a planter of seeds. Like
Mm,
I got to plant these little seeds of inspiration for people, and then they got to put in the work to grow them into whatever dream or goal it was, but it was just so freaking cool to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And if I had gone back to a gray squadron in the Air Force, there would have been, all kinds of great things that I got to do, but it wouldn't have centered around that anymore. And I
Right.
just knew I was in a unique spot. And so my gut, my heart, whatever you want to call it, told me that I should try to find a way to continue to do that. And from that is, entrepreneurship was the best route, and speaking and writing, creating content. There's so many amazing ways to reach so many people on the digital platform, digital market right now. And it's been pretty awesome.
That is awesome. I love that. And I think that's an important thing to note there as well, is that just because you've moved into a new direction does not mean that you no longer love flying or that you didn't enjoy what you were doing before. So often I think people only consider pivots when they are no longer loving where they're currently at or the things that they're doing and how they're experiencing life. And yet we can intentionally choose to go down different pathways. And after all, we're multifaceted, right? Human beings are not just one thing. There's not only one thing that lights you up. And I think this is a real good opportunity for people to understand, hey, I can love flying and I can love inspiring people. And sometimes you make money at both, sometimes you make money at one or none, but it's about finding what those things are for you and then deciding consciously and with intention how you're going to show up day to day.
For sure. You can end up kind of married to a goal. Like you
Yes.
said it, you tell everyone about it. Now you have this accountability, which is great if it's something that you continue working towards, to have other people, checking in with you, rooting for you. But I think there can also be a point where you realize that you've grown as a person, you've changed as a person, you've gotten new information, and that goal, that end state has actually changed.
Mm,
And all of a sudden, that accountability network can feel like these people that you have to uphold this promise to, which
yeah.
is silly because the whole reason you're doing it is for yourself, not for them.
Right.
And I read, or I listened to a really great podcast about when to grit and when to quit.
Mm,
And I think society, pivot is a great word and a great way to phrase it, but I think society from an outside perspective can sometimes look at people's pivots as quitting. And like, I quit the Air Force early before 20 years. And the term quit or quitter, quitting is such a negative one that it can be really great to reframe that into, why would you keep working towards something when your goals have changed? Why would you keep doing the same thing when it no longer serves what you ultimately want? And it's just silly to keep doing that. But I think a lot of us find ourselves kind of feeling obligated to see something through, regardless of how we've grown or our goals have shifted.
I think that's what we all get stuck in, right? We become the horse with blinders on and we're just off to the races and we're just going as fast as we can and we want to hurry up and get there. So we forget to enjoy the process. We forget to train properly to give us those little nuances and subtleties that would give us the indication, hey, maybe this is no longer the right racetrack, right? Because your goal has changed. And we have a lot of people commenting that they love this. These are great points. And so for everyone watching live, I'd love you to ask questions. You can do that at any point, and we'll interweave that through the conversation. But there's a lot of people who then just become the bull in the china shop, right? The proverbial bull, and they just kind of knock everything over. And then at the end, they're like, I got it. But there's like wreckage in the
Yeah.
wake and
At what cost?
smoke. Right. Exactly. What is the cost? And also the energetic cost.
Yes.
Because, one of my mentors recently posted something where it said, money without time is worthless. And it's true. So many people chase this arbitrary number that they want to have in their bank account or their yearly salary, but then they're working 80 hours a week and they're exhausted and they're tired and their health is at, risk, or maybe they've already started to have health complications at a very young age. And, especially coming from the F-16 world and aviation, we know that it's an extreme job,
Yeah.
right? Same for dispatchers and people in the support roles. So what would your advice be to people there and as they're pivoting or, realigning with these clues to the new goal? How can they um, how can they allow themselves to do that without sacrificing, everything?
Yeah, I think it's just important to remember why you decided to pivot. And
Yes.
I've run into that for sure. One of the things leaving active duty in the military was I want a better work life balance. I want more time with my family. I want more control of my schedule. And then I think in the first 6 months or so, I found that I would be working 7 days a week and, on my computer, even if we're watching movies or like saying yes to all these meetings I didn't really want to do, but I felt like I had to say yes to everything because that's how you make money. That's how you grow your business.
Yeah.
And then actually the conversation that we had after I spoke at NBAA, after that keynote, I think I shared that with you a little bit that I would feel guilty, saying no to networking requests. Especially LinkedIn is an amazing tool,
Right.
but it also gives all these people direct message access to you. And I know that I do this. I treat LinkedIn messages differently than I do Instagram messages or Facebook messages. It's almost like getting a business email. And so there's more of an obligation there to respond. Even when I look and I realize that we have nothing aligned as far as business goals and that there's likely nothing going to come from it. And
Right.
so a lot of those interactions were taking all of my time, constantly feeling like I had to, hop on a 30-minute call with anyone that asked for it.
Right.
And I think you said to me, you're like, you just sat there for a second and then you're like, that no is a complete sentence. And I think that was just such great insight because, of course, it is. But I think most of us carry guilt with feeling like we can't do everything for everyone. And so
Right.
you can find yourself just running on that treadmill and never actually getting the work done that is the reason you started doing the new thing in the first place. You could spend all day on random calls and responding to notifications and emails and all of the things. And so just each week, I think, is a good way to do it for me, like writing a list of my big priorities for the week and making sure I'm checking in on those throughout and blocking time off on my calendar to get to those, even if that is like blocking a date night with my husband where we're
Yeah.
not on our phones, and just making sure that having time with my family is still something that's a priority. Otherwise, I've just recreated the issues that I was running into before. I've just done it to myself this time.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's something that um, new entrepreneurs tend to fall into. I certainly did the same thing. And it's this, we trade kind of one cage for another, right? And we recreate the scenario that we were attempting to leave. And very often that's also because we know how to operate in that scenario. We know what it's like to be under the pressure. We know what it's like to deliver and over deliver and be that person that people rely on. And yet at the same time, it's just a story. And so we have the power to change our stories. It's the same event, but we can change how we look at it, that perspective. So let me ask you, what's a story that you recently changed in the way that you are in your business right now?
Oh, it definitely ties to what we were just talking about as far as entrepreneurs hustle. They have to grind. They have to, be up late at night. They have to be working on weekends. They have to be doing all the things. And I would find myself, when I have events and I have travel and all those things, I am fully in on those and I'm working crazy hours and flying red eyes and all the things. I was not balancing that with when I am home and it's a weekday, adjusting to take some time to myself and my family to make up for those times when I have to be gone or be on all the time. And so I was like putting it through this lens that a successful entrepreneur wouldn't be taking their dog for an hour-long walk on a Tuesday afternoon. Like, that's during the workday. How dare you do that?
Right.
But there,
Right.
at the same time, I had no problem, and more than that, I was probably proud to be on an airplane traveling across the country for an event on a Sunday
Right.
when most people are off. And so I think I've tried to just have a better perspective on that. That one of the reasons I wanted to do this was so I'm not having a clock in, clock out. Not that you do in the military, you're pretty much always on there. But so I could do something like my stepson had early release yesterday, so I could hang out with him,
Right.
or we could do something in an afternoon on a weekday. And I just think that it's so easy to fall into these I must do because this is
Mhm.
what insert title does.
Right.
But you don't take into account that all our lives are different and our priorities are different, our demands are different. So why wouldn't I take that time when I can?
Absolutely. And I think that is important for people to remember because we are a result of our programming. And our programming often comes from the very young age that we were growing up with our parents. So, looking back at what are the stories your parents hold around owning a business, around making money, around how you should be at work, right? There's going to be generational gaps and differences. They didn't have the same working lifestyle that we have now with technology, right? And so understanding where those stories come from can also be very helpful in rewriting that narrative. But it's funny, the most all the entrepreneurs we think, oh, we got to work hard, we got to always be responsive, we got to do this. And yet what does a CEO do of a very successful business? They're not always available to just anybody, right?
Yep.
They're very protective of their time. Not many people actually have direct access to this person. And, they do go for a walk at 10 a.m. with their dog on a Tuesday, or they take a nap at, 1 p.m. on a Wednesday. And those are the things that they've discovered help to recharge them so that through the week, they're getting these micro breaks and resets. And I equate it to like your phone, right? If you are waiting until your phone's at 1% and you're still trying to use it frantically before you plug it in, it's probably going to die, probably going to be stressed because your email now is, or whatever you were doing is gone, it didn't save. But if you caught that with awareness at 20%, you could charge it and have that extra space to go calmly and make your decisions, which being a fighter pilot, is very, very important.
Yeah, totally. You don't want to run yourself out of gas.
No. And I think that's really what this is all about, like changing your perspective and learning all these nuances, saying no, having healthy boundaries, right? To
Yes.
protect your time, protect your energy so that you can be when you're with your stepson, when you're with your partner, you are fully present and you're able to connect with them rather than, on that 5% and they get that version of you all the time.
Yep.
And I think it's really my best friend just got promoted to lieutenant colonel in the Air Force this week. And as he was giving his speech to everybody and to just kind of talk about his journey, he talked about the concept of who am I being for other people? And he's got it tattooed on his arm so that he can always look down at it and be reminded. And I thought that was really powerful because a lot of the times the reason why we do all these things, as you said, is because we see other people doing them.
Yep.
We think that that's what we need to do for them to approve of how we run our business or approve of us, right? It really goes back down to that.
Oh yeah, so much is chasing other people's approval. But the funny thing is that if you really think about how you judge other people,
Right.
I think you would realize that people don't think about you nearly as much as you think they do. Like no one's there watching you, checking in on like,
Binoculars.
right. No one's like, oh, she took her dog out again. It's not 5 o'clock. How dare she? Like
Right.
no one is watching, no one cares. And if anything, they are applauding you because you've been able to create that for yourself. And so it's totally self-induced.
And I think not only are they applauding you, they're thanking you because you're giving them permission to do that as well. A lot of times we look around to see like what's everyone else doing so we can blend in and be accepted. But then there's that person who stands out, who doesn't do what everybody else is doing, and they're all of a sudden there's a new pathway, and you go, "Hey, that looks kind of fun," or "That looks less intensive, and I don't have to be so stressed. Let me go that way." But it takes those trailblazers to be able to deal with the discomfort of their emotions around that story so that they can rewrite it and make that new pathway.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I've had so many other military pilots and officers, people that are pivoting out of active duty,
Yeah.
reach out about being like, I've seen what you're doing. I want to figure out how to do something like that. Like it looks really rewarding and you get to
Mm,
create your schedule. You get to do all these things. They see the freedom that comes with it, which is so funny because in my head, other military personnel and especially other pilots are my harshest critics to what I'm doing
mm,
right now. Because I
right.
should be flying for the airlines. That's what everyone does.
Mhm.
And so I have this idea that other fighter pilots, it's like a tier, right? The closer they are to my background, the more I feel judged by them, which is funny because those are my friends. Like
Right.
I know those people and I respect them, and some of my best friends are in those roles. And every time I have someone from one of those positions reach out and be like, just offer compliments about using my story how I am or building a business or whatever, I'm still slightly shocked every time that
Right.
they feel that way. And it's the silliest thing because they're just humans as well. And
Yeah.
they also want to spend more time with their family. They also want more freedom.
And I think in the beginning, when they have those comments or feedback to you, it is often a projection of they want that, but they can't have it right now, or they don't know how to have it. And so therefore they're judging and saying, "Oh, shame on you. You're not doing what I think you should do." And the word should, I'm really big on etymology of words. Do you know the origination of the word should?
I don't, but I feel like you're about to tell us. I'm excited.
Yes. So it actually comes from like 16th century Scotland, and it originates to owe is the meaning. So when I say should, it means you owe me something. And if you think about it, every time somebody tells you should do something, what is your instinct? What do you want to do?
You want to please them.
Yeah, you want to please them, or if it's your parent, you dig in your heels, right?
True.
So you're going to get the pleasing, even if it's against your own values, and then you're going to feel this compulsion to do something, and it's like hanging over your head, and then that's where the guilt and all this stuff comes
Yeah,
in. But if we look at the history of the word and its original use, that's literally what it was used for. And so understanding that, I go through the seven deadly shoulds when I work with my clients, because a lot of people, especially high performers, especially people who are decisive leaders, who are very good at what they do, would never classify themselves as a people pleaser. And yet, with these seven deadly shoulds and the way that we make our decisions, we are classically doing people pleasing behaviors or tendencies, but it's just with a mask of something else.
totally. Guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too. I am 100% a recovering people pleaser. And it can still rear its head, and it's especially with those that are close to you. And I think with the comment you made before, what I'd like to touch on is when people have gone through what you've gone through. So you said the harshest critics are fighter pilots, right? Your cohort, your colleagues in that area. That's a universal across the board. So mothers are more harsh on mothers. VCs are more harsh on other VCs. Women in a male dominated industry are harsher on other women in a
For
male
sure.
dominated industry. And it's because we have been through it. So then there's this mentality of, well, I did it this way. You should be able to do it too. And that's where the should
Mhm.
comes in. And studies have proven that empathy is lower for people who have been through the same exact experience than for others who have not, which I found very fascinating.
Yeah. No, I get asked about that specifically with other female fighter pilots that
Yeah.
are now like early in their careers, and there's for sure that tendency, that gut reaction to be harsh on each other. And I'm trying to change that for sure because man, the best mentors I've had have been other female fighter pilots because they did go through those things, so they can relate and they understand the nuances. But there is that gut reaction to see each other as competition,
Mm.
and you got to overcome that.
What was the flip in that perspective with other females? Was there a defining moment that helped you with that?
I was proved wrong again and again. I think it's a maturity thing as well. When I was early in my career, I would be the only woman in my squadron most of the time. And I knew I would have this gut reaction when we'd go to a training or someone would join our squadron or whatever it was, and there was another female fighter pilot.
Yeah.
My initial reaction before I even had a single conversation with her, before I even knew her name or anything about her, was to be like side eyeing, be like, is she more experienced than I am? Is she like one of the guys more than I am? Like, how is she treated? All of this stuff. But every single time I actually got to know those people, we developed really close relationships. We were cheerleaders for each other. We were able to vent to each other. And that happens enough times, you start to recognize that that gut reaction you're having is never playing out. And I'm like, why? That's not fair to them.
No.
Why am I doing this? And so I became very aware of it after time. And now, and I mean, for a while, I've been very good at, as soon as that like little envy or jealousy, like that feeling in your stomach starts to happen, I nip it in the bud immediately. And I think the way to overcome it for me is to just go talk to that person.
Yeah.
And then it's cured. All of a sudden you're like, now I know Sarah and she has a dog like mine and we have all these things in common and we've gone through the same stuff and now I have a new best friend.
Right.
But it is like a natural tendency for sure.
Oh yeah, I hear you. I think for the longest time I didn't feel safe in those female friendships with, especially within aviation and aerospace.
Mhm.
I felt safer with the men, and it's a very interesting power dynamic. It's a very interesting thing to look back and how you grew up, what were your female versus male role models, and what was the narrative of the kind of community you grew up in around women. I'll say for myself, growing up, my mother worked a lot and she didn't have a lot of female friendships. She had a lot of male friendships, and she was in medicine. And so that was my model. That's what I implicitly was learning. And it took me being aware, and consciously making the effort to connect and build that safety for myself in those relationships. And once you do that a couple of times and you realize that there's this been narrative been running in your head that's running amok, then you get the opportunity to make some amazing friends and mentors and cheerleaders and allies and advocates. And I think when women come together, it's very, very powerful. And so being a voice to help change that with new fighter pilots or little girls in aviation, I think that's one of the most powerful things we can do, because that's where it starts, by us acknowledging that and creating a safe connection for that young girl to experience. And men do this too with young boys. There's obviously that older generation of like, toughen up, boys don't cry, right?
Yeah,
And
totally.
if they then get a male mentor, whether it's their father or their uncle or somebody at work or just a friend, of even if it's the same age, all of a sudden there's that safety to explore a different way of being.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I like cringe thinking back on early in my career because I know I have literally said to other people, I don't really get along with women very much. I tend to jive more with guys, like just being one of the guys.
Oh
Like
yeah.
women are catty and gossipy, and I'm like, those stereotypes sabotage women all the time because not only are you fighting against stereotypes in society as a whole, but now you're creating all of these obstacles between and among yourselves that they're just noise. They're just distractions. And I hate that. I think most of us are guilty of that at some point, but
Oh yeah.
I hate that reflecting back.
Yeah, sometimes I think about, I'm just like, oh man, did I really say that? Did I really do that? And
Absolutely.
but as you said, it's almost like a coming of age thing. We have to kind of go through this process and then, get the knocks and experience what relationships really are. And I think the most important thing that you can do is to understand how you relate to things and people and ideas and concepts, because that's what life is. It's just relationships. And it can be with a person, it can be with an animal, it can be with a book, a concept, right? So examining your relationships and your stories is really important to change your perspective.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I know you mentioned a book when we were getting just before we came on. So I want you to tell me, what's your favorite line in that book, and why do you think it's so important for people facing big pivots or small pivots in the day to day?
Yeah, so beforehand we were talking about Ryan Holiday's book, The Obstacle is the Way. It's a bestseller. It's very well known. So many of the people listening have probably read it. But there was one specific line in there that really resonated with me. And he was talking about astronauts in space. And I can't quote it exactly, but he said something to the effect of, something can go wrong in that environment, but the thing that determines whether the mission succeeds or like some devastating catastrophe happens is the person's ability to regulate their emotional reaction to the thing going wrong. And that's so true in the cockpit as well, especially high performance aviation, but aviation at any level, your ability to react and not panic. Like you don't have the luxury to panic, right? You don't have the time. There's just not space for that. And so your ability to take a an objectively bad thing and hold space for it and react in a calm and a trained method in the cockpit, but in your life in general, in a thoughtful way with intention versus seeing red or becoming panicked or whatever it is, that decision can be the thing that determines success or failure.
And I love that you just said it's the decision, because a lot of people think, well, that's just how I react. And react, if we break the word down again, just means repeating action. So you are literally just repeating something from the past. And so when you make the choice to be intentional, then you respond. And the language around all of this, you might think, oh, that's just silly. It's one word, right? Like, what difference does that make? But for those of you in aviation and aerospace, what does 1 degree difference in your heading mean when you take off and you're trying to go somewhere?
Totally. Yeah. 60 to
Right?
1 rule. I just posted about that on LinkedIn not that long
Yeah.
ago.
We're not going to get to where we set out to go, even with just 1 degree difference. Maybe in, 5 minutes you can course correct, but over a period of time, that's a drastically different space. So catching these little language things will, I think, really help invert a lot of people's perspectives.
Yeah, I love the differentiating between react and respond, because I think you hear them used interchangeably a lot.
Yeah.
But there definitely can be, the reaction, the spur of the moment versus the planned, intentional, thoughtful response. And those can be two very different things.
Absolutely. And it takes time, right? It's not, oh, I've read a book, I've watched this amazing podcast with Michelle and Sarah, and now like go forth into the world and I'm forever going to be able to respond.
Right.
It takes that intentionality and that focus. And, think about the first time you drove a car. It's terrifying. There's the steering wheel and the gas pedal and the brake and all these things to turn. I mean, the first time you get into a cockpit, right? You're like, oh my gosh, there's all of this stuff I have to do simultaneously. After practice, though, you're on autopilot quite literally. Sometimes you get home and you're like, wait, how did I get home? Did I stop at the stop sign? I don't know, but clearly I made it alive, so that's really good. So the more we can be focused and present, that will help us in that process to start to notice when we slip on some of those
Yep.
things and bring them back in.
Yeah, for sure. I talk about that in terms of some aviation analogies, as far as moving from very intentional, brand new checklist, reading slowly every single step, looking at the switch, flipping it as you're going when you're learning,
Yeah.
to a point where with repetition, you develop habit patterns where you
Yes.
can kind of create a flow that you go through. And then with even more experience, kind of like the mastery level, it becomes muscle memory, where you can do it while you're doing other things with a very high success rate. So it's a scale, and I think you can use that in adjusting how you think about things as well.
Absolutely. And just that consistent practice, right? You don't use it, you lose it. And so sometimes we start to make we lose out on our commitments. It's like micro transgressions, very small things.
Mhm.
But what I like to remind people is the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. So if you start to slip up on, let's say, your healthy eating routine, all of a sudden sugar's creeping back in. All of a sudden, you're going to start skipping corners at the gym. You're going to start skipping corners at work, missing steps because of that habit pattern that is now being established. And that's the, Mr. Miyagi, wax on, wax off. You might think it has nothing to do with being a better leader or getting your job done, well, but it absolutely has everything to do with that.
Yeah, the self-discipline trickles into all parts of your life.
Mm. So speaking of self-discipline, what is one of your favorite tools to help you like stay on track and to make sure that you don't have all this excess kinetic energy, to use the phrase of the newsletter with you in it, with momentum? How do you unwind? What is something that it's a non-negotiable for you?
For me, it's definitely working out, and that might look different in different situations, right? I have my little garage gym that I use most of the time, but that could be as simple as going for a walk
Mm.
and taking that time to just step away from screens and reflect and just move my body. And when I was flying for the Thunderbirds, with that schedule being very demanding, physically demanding as well, the actual profile of flying the show, when I was able to consistently keep my workouts on schedule, even on the road, even in a hotel gym, get creative with the programming to just make it something I did,
Yeah.
even with that nice time zone swing from Vegas out to East Coast shows, which those morning workouts the first day were rough, but I would just feel so much better the rest of the day, physically, but mentally as well. I felt like there wasn't anything hanging over my head. Like I'd already accomplished something big first thing in the morning. So I had that satisfaction, which gave me a lot more kind of focus and calm for the rest of the day. And I still do that now. And so that's kind of been the thing that's been constant.
I love that. And I think, I mean, the military does that very good, well, right? And your basic training, your PT, you're going to be doing that first thing in the morning. And it really is, hey, you've done something difficult today. Even if that was just putting your socks on and like getting out the door, sometimes that's the most difficult part about it, right? And you just go for a walk, but it's you are already accomplishing things. You're doing what you say you're going to do, and so that sets you up for success for the rest of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, Michelle, I know we could talk for hours and hours and hours, but there's one last question I have for you before we wrap this up and land the plane for everybody watching. Who would you say is on your board of directors? And when I say board of directors, this is your personal board of directors, people in your mind that you might reflect on or call on to help you with your decision making.
So I love this question, and we talked about it a little bit beforehand, and I've been asked, who I look up to, who are my mentors. And those are easier for me to answer. But when you talk about board of directors, as far as like whose lens am I seeing a decision through? So you
Yeah.
said, what would Jesus do? So what would insert person do?
Right.
And I know I do this all the time, but I need to be more aware of it. So after, this conversation, I'm definitely going to start to recognize who I call on when. I
Yeah.
have realized that it's different in different situations. I think, if I'm making a business decision, for example, we talk about saying no. I would look at some opportunity that I'm kind of on the fence for, and I'm like, "Oh, I might be able to make money doing this," but it's not like it's not a hell yeah, which
Right.
someone told me if it's not a hell yeah, make it a no,
Correct.
which is easier said than done. And so
Yeah.
I'm on the fence, and I think about it through a lens, and for whatever reason, I have this like faceless male business owner who's just very successful, very decisive, who I'm like, what would he do? He would just say no to this and not feel guilty and go on with the things he was working on. Like, why do I need to waste my energy debating on this? So I know that one. It's not like a named person that I actually know.
Yes.
It's kind of this avatar combination of people that have been successful entrepreneurs in the business world. And I think you can get into a whole thing about men versus women and what we feel like we're obligated to say yes to versus not.
Right.
We don't have enough time to dive into that conversation. So there's that one, but I think it's different when I'm thinking about writing content and how it sounds to my readers. Like, what authors and content creators do I really admire? How would they view this phrasing? Is this too controversial?
Right.
Um, so I wish I could give you a list of names, but I think that's something I'm going to take away from this as a tool to kind of reflect on and maybe consciously choose
Yes.
people that I run those decisions through rather than it just kind of going on in the background.
I love that. Yeah. And I think the conscious choice as well helps you to understand some of the unconscious behaviors that might have been driving you. Sometimes logically, intellectually, we know I don't want to do that anymore. And yet, time and time again, we find ourselves doing the same damn thing.
Yeah.
And it's probably because we have this commitment to an idea or a belief or that people pleasing of someone in our mind that's been on our board since we were very young, and we haven't like checked in for a while. And so I'm going to also go away, and I haven't done this exercise for a couple of years. And I certainly know that while those people, it's not like they're bad or they're wrong to be on my board anymore, but maybe they're just no longer aligned, right? Maybe
Yeah.
different industries, different phase of the career, different phase of the business. And that's okay. So I think for everyone watching, go and think about who is it that you reflect on and make your decisions through. And that's going to be really, really powerful. And share with us, come back and comment and tell us what you came up with and, how you like the exercise. That would be great.
Yeah, I take people through in one of my workshops diving into kind of similar questions around their inner critic
Yes.
and who chimes in negatively in their head and what their inner voice is based on. Does it look like a person from their past or a parent or a boss or whatever? And I love this because it's such a nice compliment to that. It's not only like, let's shed light on the negative voices that kind of control us, but it's like, let's intentionally add positive, wise voices to this conversation. And so it's kind of like leveling that up. So I just love that concept.
Yeah, Absolutely. And I think, we have a comment from someone talking about how that amalgamation of the wise souls in one unnamed avatar is so awesome. And I agree. It's, it doesn't have to be, it can start out as this person or that person. But eventually, what I love about this, game, if you will, is that it's your voice. Yes, you're looking at, you're putting on a different pair of glasses to look at something, but it's still your voice. You're the one coming up with the answers. And so, really, you are deciding, you are making the choice. You're just giving yourself the opportunity to look at it from different perspectives instead of sticking to an old story.
Yeah, no, it's so good.
All right, Michelle. Well, thank you so much for being here with me today. This has been an absolute blast. I can't wait to have this post and shared with people. For everyone watching, it will be available on LinkedIn to watch later, as well as my Facebook and YouTube channel. It will also next month be uploaded to iTunes and Spotify. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be the lounge, and I'll send a link for people who are interested in subscribing. And for Michelle, where can people find you if they'd like to reach out? What is the best place for them to go and find more information?
Yeah, I would say LinkedIn is probably the one-stop shop that's the best. It's just Michelle Mason quotes Curran there. I do create a ton of content kind of around some of the stuff we talked about today, but taking my fighter pilot, Thunderbird pilot experiences and lessons from them and giving people what they can use from that. And I do check all of those DMs. And then you want some cockpit videos, kind of some more cool jet stuff. Instagram, which is just mace_Curran. And then my website is macecurran.com.
Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and tag all of that stuff in the comments. But for those of you guys watching now, I'm just gonna put this on the screen. And thank you very much to everyone who joined us live. We have some wonderful comments from Gavin saying that he always appreciates and respects your perspective and wise beyond your years, sage counsel. And nice to hear my insight on this very smart conversation. And that we are hurricanes with HER in capitals. And I love that. I'm definitely going to be using that. So thank you, everyone. Adam, Megan, Jacqueline, for joining us. Gavin, Scott, we really appreciate your support. And, please share this interview with other people. And if you have females in your life, if you have young males in your life, please think about how you can interact with them to inspire them to break down those barriers where they can feel safe to really step into who they are and be authentic.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you for having me on. This has been fun.
You're so welcome. Thank you, Michelle. And bye, everybody.